end of story. This only covers a fraction of what you
Yeah.
care to be telling the book. But why can you describe to us how later on, of course, when you interview Marcia in depth, you learn about how she felt when she got the initial messages from you that you had sort of stumbled onto the fact that that she had adopted this twin girl from China. You knew the backstory of the girl. How does she, like, what were the circumstances under which she received your message, and how does she feel at that time?
Well, Marcia, the adoptive mom, was just in a panic, and she had. I mean, she already had kids. She didn't adopt because she was infertile and childless. She adopted because she wanted to save the abandoned babies. She had read about, um, girls being one girl who had been thrown in a well, and there was a lot of, I mean, some of it true, but there was a lot of anti-China propaganda about abandoned babies, and she just wanted to save them. She had wanted. She's very religious. She had wanted to be a missionary when she was young, very compassionate, a compassionate conservative. Um, and she was horrified. She felt like it was her own, arrogance that she had, unwittingly contributed to this child being taken. And that comes into play later when they decide they want to talk to me. Um, and it was very difficult for the family. I'll say that. And I mean, I talked much later to Esther about it, and she was horrified too. She found out pretty quickly. Her mother tried to keep it a secret, but she was a smart little girl and read her mother's emails. And she thought she was going to be, taken and dragged back to China. She became very, say, paranoid. Well, maybe rightfully worried. She was afraid to go out, and it caused a lot of trauma to the family. Um, This was all 2009. And in 2017, I got a message on Facebook. Um, a lot of this story is about social media. I got a message on Facebook from Marcia's adult son, who is a car dealer, is car salesman in Michigan. And it was a very short message saying, you had contacted me long ago about my sister. Are you still interested? That's all it said. And I was like, huh? Who? What? Who are you? I mean, I
Now,
hadn't
this
been
is 8 years later, which is kind of
this
amazing.
8 years later. It
Yeah.
was it was right after the first Trump inauguration. I was very busy. I was living in New York. I was covering some of the drama. And he wrote back to me and he got me in touch with Marcia. And I mean, the gist of it was this girl, now named Esther, was a teenager and she wanted to meet her twin sister, and I could help. Could I help? And it was, this was very strange because they sort of trusted me because I had kept the secret for all these years. I mean, I had no choice. I'd never considered writing about it while she was a child. Um, but they asked for my help, and I got them in touch through WeChat at this point. Esther was afraid to use WeChat. She was still very, very frightened of being, caught by the Chinese and taken back. And so she wrote a letter by hand, and I translated it and scanned it, translated it, and sent it to Shuangjie, her twin. The girls were then 16, actually just short of their 17th birthdays. And Shuangjie was working as an intern in a kindergarten in Changsha, the capital of Hunan province. And they started this pen pal relationship. And I had some of the letters, but I thought it was too invasive to put them up. But it was like, what's your favorite color? What do you do for fun? And I was going to China for something else, and I decided I would set up a video call on WeChat. And the girls both liked that idea. And this is, anyway, this is Shuangjie. That's my MacBook. We're in a hotel, nice hotel um, in Changsha. And we started this series of video calls. And you have to read the book on this. Some of it was very funny. There was all sorts of weird cultural off things. They didn't know what time it was for each other. Um, Esther had sent some gifts through me, but Shuangjie didn't want to open them in front of her, which is also Chinese. There was a lot of cultural misunderstandings, but it really broke the ice. And then I did take a swab DNA test, and then I went to see Zhang, the father, and he was just, I was very apologetic for not having done anything earlier, but he was really, really nice and really gracious. And I just love this picture. This is him looking at a picture of his daughter on the computer. That's the midwife also who delivered the twins, also looking. Um, it was very, it was, it was very funny in the village because, everybody was like very excited about this, and they were looking at the pictures of Esther saying, no, is that Fang Fang? Fang Fang was her Chinese name. Is that Fang Fang or Shuangjie? No, that's Shuangjie wearing makeup. Esther wore more makeup than Shuangjie. And, I realized even without the DNA test, they were twins. And I brought the pictures back from the village. I showed Esther the picture of her father looking at her, and then I had a picture of her looking at her father looking at her, and it was just, they were like, we want to go to China, can you help? And at that point I said, I can help, but I want to write. And it's because they had no money, and we would have to raise money. I would have to help them raise money. And I mean, at this point, up to that point, I had really just been helping them because I felt bad. But it all came together very quickly, and we went. This is the family, by the way, in Texas. This is the little girl in the pink is Fang Fang, Esther, an older sister. This is what they had been told. Xiao Fuchen, female born on June 8th, 2000, was found abandoned at the gate of Chaotou Bamboo Craft Factory. We cannot find her natural parents and relatives up to now. Maybe they always get a certificate of abandonment. It was all fake. The orphanages gave them a new name. Esther loved Chinese food and actually cooks very well. And here she is, having made dumplings in her house it's near Fort Worth, and that's Marcia. So it all came together pretty easily.
Let me, one quick question. At what point did you explicitly tell Marcia and Esther that she had been stolen from the birth family and not abandoned by the birth family?
They knew that immediately because
Right.
she was in this series of stories about babies who had been taken, and it was, so it was known right away. And, you would have thought that would have made her feel better that she hadn't been abandoned, but actually it made her feel worse because she felt like she should go back. And, also for Marcia, who had thought she had was, doing this great deed by adopting Esther, the there were people who were saying, you need to give her back, you need to send her back. and it was very difficult. Anyway, we got ourselves together pretty quickly. It's funny, after all of that, it was just, I saw, I went to Texas, I saw them. I said, you let me write, I'll, I'll help you raise the money. The LA Times, which I was working for then, paid for the car and the interpreter. And, you know, anyway, we raised the money for their flights. It was not that expensive. And we did it over Lunar New Year because, that's the time you do these things. And this is kind of like the first meeting. And then it's Shuangjia. This is the other girl, Marsha. And this like funny thing. I felt like they were like a bride and groom at you know, an arranged marriage. It took a really long time before they would actually look at each other. You can see the family. This is a rice growing family. It's winter, so those are the rice paddies in the background. And they just, there was like a long time they just wouldn't talk to each other. We had a lot of meals, really good food. You could see the two twins. Shuangjia is wearing a sort of a white fuzzy thing. Um, Esther is in black with her hair down. And um, Esther had begun a career as a photographer, and she's an extremely talented photographer. And so she showed her camera um, to Shuangjia. The girls are, I guess, 18 now. This was the aunt who told the story about how baby Fong Fong was taken away. And it was very nice. There's the mom in red. She took all her daughters, and we walked down to the bamboo grove where the twins were born. It's a group photo. I'm sort of in the back with the orange scarf. This is the orphanage. It was a very poor, rundown, old-fashioned institution at the time of the adoption. They made a lot of money through adoption, and the whole place looked like really looked like a luxury hotel.
So let's rest on the orphanage for a minute, because was it a big decision to decide to go to the orphanage with the families, and then describe a little bit like your interaction with the people at the orphanage once with
Oh, this was actually very, very funny. You might remember this. So we were in Hunan for a couple of days. We weren't staying in the village because the house wasn't heated, and the bathroom would not have been up to the standards of Marcia, the adoptive mom, who wasn't used to such things. Um, but we were getting, this was sort of towards the end of the visit to the village, and we hadn't wanted to go to the orphanage because we were afraid that we might get detained. As Ed, this, you can get detained in China for all sorts of reasons. And
Mhm.
while this was not as sensitive a story as some other things I had written, I knew that reporters who had tried to follow this business about the stolen children, had problems. There was a documentary, um, One Child Nation, that I was actually supposed to be in, that the filmmakers had a lot of difficulty. So we decided finally to go, and we walked in. It was like Marcia, it was like the whole group of us, and it was not that well guarded, and they were just aghast that we walked in, and I really thought we were gonna get detained. Um, the, they were like people I knew that people had visited the orphanages before, that they do allow adoptees to visit, but it's, um sorry, there's some noise going on here. Um, it's not you have to be it has to be arranged by Beijing and all of that stuff. And the um when we got in, they asked what Esther's orphanage name was. And and then I realized that if we told them, they would know that she was one of the stolen kids. I mean, it had turned into a pretty big scandal.
Mm.
And Marcia was like really, really clever and played the Southern Belle and was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I didn't make an appointment. Next time she did the whole 9 yards, and it worked beautifully. She was like, I thought she would have been a much better foreign correspondent than me. And we sort of skedaddled out of there. So that was the orphanage. We were not there very long. Um, the girls hung out a bit in Changsha. We drove back to Changsha again, the capital, and the um, here they actually had switched clothing with each other, and it was interesting because they looked very different when you saw them without makeup and in their own clothes, but when they wore makeup, you could see that it was really cosmetic and cultural differences between them. They looked so much the same.